So my name's Naomi Sugunasingha and I'm a third year trainee at Salomons.
Why did you want to be a clinical psychologist?
I think that from quite a young age I became quite aware of the differences across cultures in kind of how mental health is viewed and understood, and also quite aware of the damage that services can do by not paying attention to these differences. And I think that I really wanted to be in a position to have a say in how we address these issues and how we support people from minority backgrounds. And that made me really interested in the profession.
Top tips on getting relevant work experience.
I think my top tips for getting relevant work experience is to throw away your pride and to be really persistent and cold email people, cold call people, be creative in where you're looking to get experience, because actually there are lots of places you can get experience that may not seem like they're relevant to begin with, but there's lots that you can learn and develop. So I think creativity is like really important, and maybe even like thinking about splitting your time and working across different roles if you're able to, because it kind of allows you to play around and see what kinds of roles you like, and it helps you to network. And I think that's really important as well, because if you can make friends and build kind of support networks within the community, that will help you to kind of learn more about what the profession looks like and to open doors to new experiences. I guess another tip for finding relevant work experience, I guess if you can choose an undergraduate course that has a sandwich year or a placement year, that could be really helpful, because then when you graduate you've got some experience under your belt that might give you an edge, help you to get kind of a foot in the door when you're applying for kind of your postgraduate roles. And I guess, you need to like enjoy yourself during your undergraduate years. But if you have any time to do some kind of work experience on the side or volunteering, when, you've got fewer bills to pay and things like that, if you can, do some volunteering when you're at university, that probably will, help you get a foot in the door as well.
Do's and don'ts for the DClinPsy application.
I think that definitely a mistake that I made was to try and list all of the things that I had done and to try and fit in as many buzzwords as I possibly could. I think actually what's more valuable is thinking about exactly what you've learned from that, and that's a bit of a cliche. That's what everyone tells you need to do. I don't think there's no kind of right way. There's no formula for the application, but I think I've got a few. I guess my top tips would be to first be specific and to kind of show rather than tell. So rather than kind of describing all the things you've done, maybe give an example of something, and that also shows whoever's reading it a little bit more about you and about how you're applying the things that you're saying that you're doing. I think that bringing a bit of yourself to the form if you can. I think there's a balance of, not feeling pressured to share more than you're comfortable with, but being able to identify what is unique about you, because that kind of helps for people who are reading the form to see how you're different from somebody else. And if they're reading lots of different forms, it will help them to kind of remember you. And I think that's super important. The biggest problem with the form is probably the ridiculous lack of characters that you have and the lack of space that you have to say everything that you want to say. And I think rather than trying to fit everything in, like choosing a few things that you think are super important and spending a bit of time explaining why those things are important to you and what you think you can add to the profession, which obviously is a big feat, but play around with it. I guess I would also say that use the whole form. I think that people think the personal statement is the most important part of the form. But actually, if you use the job descriptions to describe everything that you've done, that leaves loads of space to be reflective and to talk about things in more depth in your personal statement so that you're not repetitive. And I would say to use other parts of the form to also kind of bring your personality and your individuality to it. It's also really important to think about the ethos of the courses that you're applying to, and spend some time working out, what they cover. Obviously, at the end of the degree, all of the degrees are the same, but the way that they go about covering the material is going to be different, and the things that they value is going to be different. And I think ultimately that shapes how you frame your form and what things you prioritize. And hopefully there'll be a match there with things that you value and the things that the courses value. So really spending some time to work out, not just where you want to live, but, what parts of the profession you really value. Is it research? Is it reflective practice? Is it critical and community psychology? Really thinking about where you fit. And I think that's really important in the form. I think you can really want to kind of be strategic with where you're applying to, but ultimately you're probably going to have the best chances of getting onto a course that kind of fits with you.
Do's and don'ts for the DClinPsy interview.
The interview process obviously can be extremely stressful and daunting, but I think the best way to prepare, or at least the way that I found useful, was to spend some time thinking about different categories of questions, types of questions, and reflecting on my experiences, and maybe practicing with questions that are a bit tricky or maybe are a bit controversial, or things that might be difficult to answer, and just kind of practice what it's like saying those things out loud. I would discourage anybody from kind of memorizing answers to questions or spending too much time working out what exact questions might come up, because actually I think interview panels can probably tell if you're really, really rehearsed, and that actually if you spent time thinking about things are important to the profession, like kind of the political climate and the NHS and how the NHS is being run and what the implications are for services, and then in turn the implications for psychologists, thinking about issues around service user involvement and around diversity and equal access to services, and kind of different populations and what their needs are, and how you manage yourself in these situations, using supervision and thinking about self-care, and depending on the course you're applying to, maybe thinking about kind of personal reflections and your own development. And these are really broad things, but I think that if you spend enough time kind of processing those things, it leaves you prepared for kind of a range of questions that might come up at interview, and then your answers hopefully are more authentic than if you are spending all your time trying to remember like a paragraph that is phrased exactly the way that you think it's gonna be, and then they ask a question, it's not quite what you practiced, and then it's quite easy to get flustered. I would also say, if you can, interview practice. So if you know somebody that can give you a mock interview, at work, or I just had a friend ask me a few questions, and it's more, I think, the practice of saying things out loud, and you can kind of mortifying. You can record yourself if you want and then listen back to it, which is horrible, but also really useful, because then you can pick up on those weird things that you do, and particularly if you can make yourself anxious enough to see what those are, and then really get to know yourself in an interview and get comfortable with like the process. I think that probably gives you a better chance overall. Yeah, I think it's really hard if you are in a role where maybe you don't have access to a clinical psychologist who may be best placed to give you feedback, and perhaps you don't know anyone who is a trainee or anyone else who's applying, and that can be stressful, because then you don't have access to knowledge about the courses or about what to expect in the interviews, or how to write your form, and so I guess my advice there would be to kind of try and build your network, try and find maybe groups, minority groups through the DCP, or there's lots of, I guess, like trying to access groups maybe through NHS trusts. Yeah, and building your networks, however, in whatever way you can. I think if there are a few of you that are interested and you don't have much information, maybe you can kind of pool your resources, and I think I had a group of us who we worked from different services, but we'd met across kind of different roles over the years, and we drew together kind of the small bits of information that we had, and interviewed each other, and kind of asked each other questions to help us get more comfortable with the process. And I think sometimes you have to be a bit creative in how you build your networks and how you practice kind of in all areas of preparing for applying. So I think it's possible to do without being fully connected to the kind of clinical psychology networks, and I think try not to be too disheartened if you don't have access to that. I think it's still possible to kind of get your information from the Deacon, kind of the websites, and from Clearinghouse has lots of information on there, and it's harder work, but I think ultimately if you don't have access to those networks, to kind of work towards building those yourself.
What obstacles have you experienced on your journey to being a clinical psychologist?
I think that some of the obstacles might be kind of in my head, but obviously maintained by this idea of there's a route that you need to take to get onto training, and that route is you become an assistant psychologist. And I probably applied to 100, I'm not exaggerating, assistant psychologist jobs, and I never had a paid post. Had a handful of interviews, and that's a lot of rejection. And even though that being rejected in this process is perhaps quite normal, it still doesn't feel very good. And I think continuing to persist when there's no guarantee that you get on, and there's no guarantee that you will, even, I guess, when you don't get onto that first hurdle where you think that you need to be an assistant and you can't get that post, and you're trying to consider if it's possible to work for free. I worked for free for a little bit of time, and I was really privileged in that I was able to live at home, and I was able to pick up a second job and work in the evenings and weekends around the kind of honorary position, and it was exhausting. And it meant that I had no money, and there was lots of rejection, and it has the potential to kind of take over and make you not feel very good about yourself and your abilities. But I think that focusing on finding roles that are ones that you enjoy and where you're learning, and there's kind of space to develop, and kind of continued professional development is encouraged. I think that in those positions, you can kind of enjoy the process, and then it becomes less about what the ultimate goal is, and more about you working in an area that interests you. And I think kind of getting to the point where I felt that was where I was, and that was probably the biggest obstacle, kind of maintaining my self-care, and learning to take the rejection and not too personally. That was probably the hardest thing to overcome. I think trying to maintain strong supportive networks, and my friends and family being supportive of me, which was lucky to have such good friends and family to do that for me. I think that really reminding yourself that the rejection is totally normal, and that actually I think the advice I was given to kind of be creative and moving away from that idea that there's one route to get into the profession, and actually there are so many different ways. And actually what's helpful is that if everyone comes into the profession from a different place, that adds to the diversity of the profession, diversity of experiences, and it means that everyone's not the same, and I think ultimately that's really valuable. I think having support from friends and family, and trying to do things outside of psychology that I really enjoy, and that's also a bit of a cliche, this taking care of yourself, but actually it's super important. It's really important when you're working in setting that can be quite high pressured, and you're working with people who need your support. Maintaining your own well-being is really important, and thinking about kind of taking regular breaks and using your leave, and just doing things that are fun, and trying to keep a hold of all of that along the journey, I think makes it a lot more enjoyable.
How has your experience of training been?
This is sweet. Training is hard. Training is really difficult. I think I really value the kind of experience I had prior to getting onto the course, because it has prepared me a bit more for kind of the clinical work that's kind of expected of us straight away. And I think it's important to acknowledge that it's not an easy course to be on, and it's quite pressured, but I'm really enjoying it. It's such a privilege to be given the opportunity to work with different populations in different settings. The way it works at Salomons is that we kind of have placements based on populations as opposed to competencies, but we move every 6 months, which can be a bit stressful, finding a new team and finding your feet and learning what you're doing, but it gives you the opportunity to kind of see the kinds of work that you like, and maybe what kinds of populations you like to work with, and kind of figure out maybe what you don't like as well. And I think, that's a real privilege, and to also be kind of able to learn in lots of different ways. I think it's nice being at university. It's nice having a cohort of other people who are kind of experiencing the same things as you and care about the same things as you. That's really nice. But then, you're on placement and you're doing lots of learning from your supervisors and within your team, and there's a lot of knowledge to get there. And I think that it's really nice to have a protected space to learn and to be able to work in roles where you feel like, hopefully you're making a difference to people's lives. As you go through the course, it helps you to kind of work out the kind of clinician you want to be, and that's really nice, and it helps you to kind of plan where you want to be when you're done. I think I've had a really positive experience of training so far.
How has being from a BAME background impacted your training experience?
I think that I've been really fortunate. The Salomons course has been really great. I guess what I most value about being on the course is having space to talk about issues that I think are really important. To be able to talk about racism and discrimination, and to think about the impact of class, and to talk about privilege, and to kind of think about intersectionality and all of these things that are really, really important, I think, to the profession, and to kind of think about all these things with a critical eye, and to acknowledge when systems are unjust, and our role in maintaining these systems, and our role in our kind of responsibility to break unjust systems, and to help find alternatives. I think all of these things are really, really powerful, and I think as a trainee, you're in, a relative position of power to kind of think about how you would like to work as a psychologist when you graduate, and to think about, to have the space to reflect on all of these things. I think that's what I've most valued on the Salomons course. It can be really difficult being from a minority background on the course, because you remain a minority in your cohort and in the profession as a whole, and it's hard to be on placement and to be not seeing other people that look like you, or know about the experiences that you've had, or have those shared experiences. And sometimes that's really difficult. It's difficult to be the person that is kind of championing the issues that you care about. I don't want to be the person that is always raising my hand to highlight, should we think about culture? Should we think about race? Should we think about what their experience, what this person has experienced in terms of, being marginalised? Should we think about these things? Sometimes that can be tiring, but ultimately I think you're in a space where people are happy to hear what you have to say, and you're in a position where you've got a perspective maybe that's different, and that's so valuable, and has the potential to be so powerful. And I think that the lack of diversity in the profession is a problem that that we care about, and I guess that's in part why I wanted to be a part of this video project, because I think that these things are really important. And as a trainee, I felt really heard by my peers, and by the course, and by my supervisors, and I'm probably quite lucky in that respect. But I would like for other people to have those experiences, and have kind of the opportunity to share their perspectives.
What advice would you give to your 16-year-old self?
Yeah, I think things can feel really difficult when you're 16 years old, and ultimately it's probably going to be okay. I think you need to have a good balance of, working hard and thinking about your future, but also not taking things too seriously, and having fun. I think working to find something that you enjoy and find something that you really care about, that you want to pursue. So I think that's ultimately the most important thing, in like finding value in the work that you want to do. I think that's probably an advice that I could have used. I guess the other thing is maybe would have wanted to prepare myself for the rejections to come, and to kind of build up the things that are going to help you to be resilient, and try lots of things, be creative, and try and do things outside of your comfort zone, and find out what you really enjoy doing, and find out what you're good at, and do things even if you're not very good at them. And I suppose, if you don't avoid things that you're not good at, then maybe rejection doesn't feel so bad. And then, I guess go from there.
What advice would you give to your aspiring clinical psychologist self?
I guess the advice I would give is to keep persevering. If it's something that you really kind of care about, keep going. It's okay if you don't get the job. It's okay if you don't get through the interview, or if you get some rejections. That's okay. I suppose as long as you still can find value in the work that you're doing, and that you're enjoying kind of it's so cliche, but as long as you're enjoying the journey, and that you're kind of developing, I think that ultimately where you end up is going to be okay. I guess I would also say that there's no need to kind of idealize the profession, and that when you're applying, if you've got in mind other things that you think that you'd be able to do, that you would gain kind of the things that you wanted out of the professions. If you really think about what it is that you want from the job. Why do you want to be a clinical psychologist? Is it because you want to help vulnerable populations? Is it because you are interested in specific kind of therapeutic models? Is it because you care about service structures and policy? And what is it that you enjoy? And actually, is it possible to find those things in another role? And I think that if you have an idea of a few things you could do that meet those values, take some of the pressure off, and that gives you a better chance of getting onto the course. But it also means that everything you want isn't the course, and that there are other things that you can do and find value in. And I think that's really important, to kind of have that balance and hold that in mind, and that it's not like a hierarchy. There are lots of things that you can do. I think, having some perspective about kind of the realities of applying, and your own well-being, and ultimately getting what you want out of your role. I think that's probably the most important thing. And if you hold all of those things in mind, then you're in better stead to enjoy the journey and to enjoy the kind of learning process, and eventually get to the role that you want to be in.